The White House says airstrikes on Iran remain on the table as US President Donald Trump weighs up his response to a crackdown on nationwide protests. Rights groups say they have confirmed the killing of many hundreds of people during the demonstrations, the largest in several years. The Islamic regime blames the bloodshed on foreign interference and has ordered counter-rallies in an attempt to regain the initiative, with pro-government supporters flooding the streets on Monday. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian was among those joining the crowds. And with the threat of US intervention in Iran looming, President Donald Trump says the leaders of the Islamic Republic have called him to negotiate.
Bodies in bags at a morgue outside Tehran. Hospitals with beds full of injured people, seen here in footage verified by DW's Farsi service. Protesters vandalizing the Abu Zar mosque before allegedly setting it on fire. Iran could be at a tipping point. US President Donald Trump says Iran wants to talk, while insisting military action is still on the table.
The leaders of Iran called, they want to negotiate. I think they're tired of being beat up by the United States. Iran wants to negotiate, yes.
In public, Iranian politicians have blamed the US and Israel for the protests, saying the country is ready for war, but not ruling out negotiations.
Negotiations must be serious and genuine, not issuing orders and dictating terms, which is the habit of some countries.
If talks break down or if Trump attacks Iran preemptively, the Islamic Republic has threatened to strike U.S. military bases in the region. Many are close by in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iraq. It could also strike shipping vessels in the narrow Strait of Hormuz, a choke point through which much of the world's oil traffic passes. But Iran's leverage here may be limited. It attacked a U.S. base in Qatar last summer with missiles, all of which were reportedly shot down. Negotiations with the U.S. could include relief from economic sanctions, which have throttled the Iranian economy. The country's nuclear program, thought to have been set back after U.S. and Israeli strikes last year, could also be up for discussion. A deal to dismantle that program would be a major victory for Trump. For many here, a deal between the U.S. and Tehran would be bittersweet. Though it could make economic conditions easier, it would also allow the regime to carry on, exactly what protesters want not to happen.
It's great to welcome Bradley Bowman back to DW. He's with the Centre on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Hi there. Now, Donald Trump seems very invested in what's happening in Iran. Why do you think that is?
I think President Trump is vested in the developments in Iran because he understands that America has important interests there. And he's issued some public warnings or red lines. You know, he said on January 2nd, if Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, the United States of America will come to the rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go, he posted. So it appears, as your correspondent has highlighted, that Iran has just done that. They heard his warnings, they shrugged, and they proceeded to cross his red line. So now we have the regime blocking internet access, trying to make it more difficult for the Iranian people to communicate with one another, and of course trying to hide what the regime is doing to the Iran people, and that is killing them. So, you know, I think coming off the 12-day war where the U.S. conducted successful military operations against Iran and the success of the operation in Venezuela, President Trump will not hesitate to use military force in Iran if he thinks it's in his and America's national security interests. And I think Iran realizes that, and that's why they're reaching out to have negotiations, because this regime in Iran has consistently used negotiations when it's feeling pressure, when it wants to alleviate that pressure, and it wants to avoid the consequences of its behavior.
Let's talk a bit more about that. If the regime is open to talk, as Trump says it is, what could or would its leaders be actually willing to negotiate about?
You know, I've been following Iran for a long time, and I have not seen, and I do not see now, any evidence that this regime is willing to make serious good faith concessions related to its nuclear program, its ballistic missiles, and its support for terrorism. So I think they will continue to use negotiations in the way I just described. And I think it's frankly a trap that the United States should not fall into. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me 50 times, shame on us. And I do worry that the Trump administration is at risk of falling into that trap again.
What should it do to not fall into that trap as you've described it?
I think it should, as a general rule in U.S. foreign policy, I think we should issue warnings and red lines reluctantly. But once you've issued them, which President Trump has done, you have to back them up, lest your adversaries and your allies conclude that we're all talk. And so I think if the murder of innocent Palestinians, innocent Iranians continues, that Trump will have to use military force. And I think this administration in Iran will view itself in an existential moment, and it may act more aggressively than it did during the 12-day war, but that will only escalate the military actions of the Trump administration.
Let's open this up and look at the wider context. We've seen military action in Venezuela, threats against Greenland, now a possible military intervention in Iran. How would you categorise or describe this last week and a half of Donald Trump's second term?
This has been an extraordinary week and a half. There's headlines I never thought I would see. But the broader grand strategic point here with respect to Iran is that I think the United States and, dare I say, our European allies confront the most daunting geostrategic environment we've seen since 1945. And one of the reasons for that is how China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are cooperating. And Tehran is the weakest member of that axis of aggressors, but they've been punching above their weight, helping to support Putin's aggression in Ukraine, fueling Beijing's massive military modernization expansion effort, and supporting terrorism in the Middle East. I mean, let's remember that the Russian drone incursions of NATO airspace are thanks at least indirectly to the support of Putin they've received from Iran. So I'll end with this, if the Iranian people are finally able to have a government that represents their true interests and is focused on their well-being rather than domestic oppression, the export of terrorism, and the pursuit of nuclear weapons, it would be a victory both for the Iranian people and I would say a major grand strategic win for Europe and for the United States.
Thanks a lot for that, Bradley. That's Bradley Bowman with the Foundation for Defence of Democracies.
Thank you.
Well, part of the difficulty in assessing what's been happening in Iran is the fact that the government has cut off the internet and telephone links. One of the few ways to exchange information with the outside world has been through Starlink satellite connections. Starlink is owned by US space technology company SpaceX. It relies on a constellation of satellites to transmit internet data. 29 of them were aboard this rocket last month. Iran has been jamming the signals, but users there have had some success getting through. US President Donald Trump has spoken to SpaceX boss Elon Musk to see what can be done to help more Iranians get online through Starlink.
But we're looking at it.
And it's great to welcome Mehdi Yahyanejad now. He is an Iranian digital rights and democracy activist. He joins us from Los Angeles. Welcome to you. As I understand, you've previously been involved in efforts to send Starlink user terminals to activists and citizen journalists in Iran. Could you tell us why is Starlink so important for Iranian protesters right now?
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, we've been involved in sending Starlinks to Iranian activists and citizen journalists in Iran because this is the only way to stay connected with the individuals on the ground and get the videos and images of all these protests to outside Iran. The Iranian government often wants to crack down during a full internet shutdown because they can make sure that the international community is not able to see those videos and images. But these activists and citizen journalists who are making these videos and who are recording these videos on the streets, they've been able to send these videos to outside world, and these videos have been shared on social media and with news agencies. So people have been able to see to what extent killings and crackdown has happened inside Iran.
And you're saying basically it's one of the few ways to ensure that accurate reporting is taking place in regards to these protests. It seems Starlink is itself being heavily disrupted right now in Iran. If the regime is behind this, what can be done about that? How can it be countered?
That's correct. Iranian government has tried to jam this Starlink signal in major cities, but they haven't been fully successful. A lot of the Starlink users I've been in touch with, they reported the lower performance of their devices, but overall they've been able to use them and send the videos and images. From what we know, Starlink company has tried to send a new software update to improve the performance and counter some of the jamming that's been happening in Iran. And from what we hear, that update has helped the users inside Iran.
Okay, Mehdi, as I understand, using Starlink in Iran is illegal. It can lead to prison or even a death sentence. Can it be used without being detected?
If it's hidden well, and if the users are careful not to go to the Iranian websites inside the country and primarily use it just to access messengers and social media outside the country, the risks are not that high. But we have heard reports in the past few days that Iranian government is actually going and checking the roofs on many buildings inside Tehran, trying to find these Starlink devices. And in most cases, these devices get confiscated, but there are cases that people have been imprisoned, and in some cases, they've been accused of being spies because of using such devices.
We've been speaking to Mehdi Yahyanejad, a tech entrepreneur, digital rights and Iranian democracy activist. We really appreciate your insights today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.